We continue our exploration of commentaries on the Dhammapada by the Mother. We have been exploring different aspects of it. We spoke about the mental discipline, we have spoken about how purification is important, and also why it is important to live a well-examined life. In the same context, today we'll be exploring the topic from belief to experience. And in fact, the topic itself gives us a sense of movement and a sense of journey, that we are going from belief to experience. It's like moving from point A to point B. And I'll be attempting to share how our psychological processes work, how do we form beliefs, and what role does experience play. And the commentaries, the topic which I've taken this from is the Adept, which essentially means the accomplished one. Even if we look at, say, the Gita, we have the aspect of Sthit Pragya, that who is the one who is stated in the divine, who is rooted in the being, what are the qualities. That person is above the dualities of life, is above pain, joy, suffering, understands that life is much beyond what we see. So these are the qualities which all of us aspire, and we have a sense that there's a work required in our being to kind of achieve that. And that is what makes our journey much more experiential and much more open to the higher power. So when I speak about belief, essentially what comes to us is, it is something which helps us to function in the world, to kind of create mental constructs, what is what, and how I can use the current information I have to function in the world, to have interactions in the world. And often we find ourselves that our experience is quite limited to certain constructs, that hardly we question that what I believe in, what is the origin of it. If I believe in, say, that okay, there's a certain philosophy behind, say, the creation of the universe, where is that sense of surety coming in me that I believe in it? So the immediate indicator of testing your belief is, when somebody rejects your belief, how do you feel? So there's always a core in which you believe, and then on that belief there are different beliefs which are built. And one of the easiest way to check it is that if somebody comes to you and say that what you believe in is absolutely wrong, or I don't believe in it, or just question it, immediately the sense which you have tells you that how much your belief is rooted in your experience and how much your belief is simply a borrowed sense of information taken from the world. Because anything which is borrowed from the outside, you will have a fear of losing, because you have taken from the outside and you are scared, what if I will lose it? So you will do everything to protect it. So your life will be governed by the principle of fear, that I'm gathering more and more information, I'm creating my own belief system so that I can function in the world. But all of this is built on a sense of fear, what if I lose it one day? Because behind that belief, there is no base of experience. So when there is no base of experience, we are really like fighting the battle in the front with no backup plan. And that is why there is no sense of security, there is no sense of peace, there is no sense of calmness, because constantly we are thinking, what if we lose it, what if we lose it? So we are playing in that sense of defending, not exploring life. So once we start understanding that, then that question comes, do I really want to inquire more, or do I just want to continue living the life which I am living? Because as we say that everything has a reason, everything has a purpose. When we are born, when we are raised in certain situations, certain circumstances, there's a lot of information which we gather which helps us build our belief system. And those are essentially how I spoke about, to how do you operate in the world. So you know, okay, this is the origin of the universe. this is how a family setup works, this is how education setup works. Education is required to work, and then there are certain set of interpersonal relationships in my life. Everything is given to you as do's and don'ts, and you continue living your life. But just the fact, for example, that all of us are sitting in this room, that we have some sense of something which is intangible, something which is beyond what we see, but maybe we have not given that a form. So the moment you have that sense that I want to move beyond what is given to me, the first step from belief to experience is already taken. And that step, once you take it, that is when the journey of yoga begins. Because essentially the journey of yoga is exploring the unexplored, which means that whatever is given to you, slightly from a very inquisitive sense and not an egoistic perception, you attach a why to it. That, okay, I'm experiencing it, why, what lies behind it, and not from a very defendant aspect, what lies behind it. So there is not sense of proving, but a sense of process and exploration. So once we make that shift, we realize that there is much more to the idea, and not just I'm restricting myself to the idea. So you open yourself to knowledge. So the journey from belief to experience goes through knowledge. And we also realize that knowledge is also a very open-ended term. We often confuse, if we look from the surface or the outside world, we confuse knowledge with information. And when we look from, say, the inner perspective or the scriptural perspective, we confuse knowledge with wisdom. So both ways we are kind of confusing things, because somewhere we are in the middle. We know that what is given to us is not enough. We also have a sense of beyond, but we are in the middle trying to understand that how to connect. And the path of yoga is essentially about bridging the two. So once you bridge the two, and bridging happens in your own being. And that is why on the path of yoga, especially when we talk about integral yoga, human beings become very, very important. And when we see from the lens of evolution, we realize that, okay, we speak so much about the mind, that mind gives us a sense of intellectual acceptance. But beyond that, it does nothing. And because the fundamental aspect of mind is division, it creates division in beliefs, that what I believe in is the thing, what you believe in is not what it is. So the clashes of beliefs happen because we are stuck in the very mechanical nature of mind, which only understands through division. But the more we move higher in the realm, we realize the importance of integration, that my belief has a place, your belief has a place, and there's something beyond all these beliefs from where everything is originating. So the origin can be here, the origin can be there. It's how you are bringing them together, and that is where man has a very important role to play. And in this process of bringing these two worlds together, when I speak about knowledge, we often understand knowledge in terms of, like how I said, either information or in terms of the deepest knowledge. In fact, if you look at it from the integral perspective, Sri Aurobindo has spoken about 4 types of knowledge. And though in our integral education we have that principle of near to the far, we realize that on a regular basis it is a sense-based understanding which we have of the world. What you see, you believe. And then there is also a sense of being a little more introspective, that I'm not seeing right now, like for example, whatever we discussed today, you just go back home and you kind of reflect on it later. And that reflection may have a revelation for you. So it might be, for example, I spoke 10 different things, but one thing remained with you, and you are like, okay, but from all of these things, why did I just pick this? So that will open a whole door for you for your own exploration. But if you are sitting in this room with the belief that, oh, whatever happens in the ashram, that is what needs to be believed. So if I'm saying something which doesn't say, go down with your own belief system, at that point, the interesting part comes in, that do you question your belief or do you question what I'm speaking? Because both are half-truths. But in that moment, if you are able to hold your attention and you're like, okay, this is what is prompting me to question either the speaker or my own self. So then the speaker or your own questioning just becomes a tool to actually go to the experience which is happening somewhere deep inside, but it has never got that context or that space to actually come in the forefront. So all these things which happen on the outside are just an indicator which tells us actually what's going inside of us. And more when we understand our own indicators, more and more we become more in that sense of individualized. And when we become more and more individualized, introspection, like I said, becomes a very natural part of our being. And then we can also move to the third aspect of knowledge, which is more becoming aware of your inner states. So it's an inner awareness of what is happening inside of me. And as you progress on the path, you actually reach a place where you become really one with the object of knowledge. And of course, for us, it's a very far-fetched dream. We hold that aspiration, but on a daily basis, the more we become aware of what is going within me, that's sufficient to actually come out and express. And when another indicator happens is to check your belief. When I say that if somebody rejects, what happens in you, and then what you do to overcome it. So then do you build a wall to protect yourself, or you break the walls of your belief and attempt to understand the other? So the action which you take decides your journey ahead. So that is one aspect which you can see, because all of us, like we're talking about belief, we do believe in perfection. We are like, oh, everything should be perfect. For example, if I'm coming here to speak, I should speak perfect. This should be perfect. Your understanding should be perfect. But we often fail to understand that the experience of perfection is always through imperfection. But we don't want to experience that imperfection because we are holding on to the idea of perfection. So to break an idea, or for that matter, to even achieve an idea, you have to go through an experience. And that is the experience which bridges the gap between, say, knowledge and practice. That for whatever I'm saying, when I actually apply it, it's only then when I'll see the error in my ideas. Till the time I don't apply it, knowledge in ideas is always perfect. So if I'm walking the path of yoga, essentially it means that I am applying my knowledge. And when I'm applying my knowledge, I'm seeing the errors. And in that seeing of errors, if I identify with my errors, then I'm again constructing a belief that, see, I tried, I failed, so it's a belief that I don't know. So at every step, we have a tendency to create a belief which can either halt our progress or which can facilitate our progress. And all this awareness which we talk about is essentially to give us that motivation, to give us that support, that there's always a movement on the journey of yoga. The sense of progress comes in when we keep moving, because every time you experience something, you take something out of it. You can either accept it, integrate in your part that yes, this is facilitating my journey, or you can let go of that part that no, this is not required in my journey. Both will only happen when you have a sense of separation from what is happening. If you're too identified with, say, if something good happens, that really boosts your ego. If there's something that happens which you feel that no, this is not good for me, you kind of refuse to associate with it, but not actually work on it. So how do you really bring around your life that what am I actually doing? For example, if you really look around, this is whole idea, especially in the today's world, it become very individualistic, that my ideas, my thoughts, I also have a role to play in the world. Especially in the family dynamics in India, we see that suddenly people are becoming more individualized. But we often fail to realize that that individualization is not happening with an experiential base. It is happening with the borrowed understanding of the world that, oh, the world is becoming individual. But we fail to realize that our understanding of world is through a mediator. For example, say today we speak about social media. When as a young person of say 20 or 25, I see, oh, people are going there, people are going here, they're writing their self, they're becoming more and more individualized. So I was like, oh, I also have a voice. But we fail to realize that an external influence is taking me away from my roots to create an individuality on the outside which I'm holding on to, which has no base. So that can be, say for example, belief can be a starting point that yes, there is a possibility that I can be on my own or I can think on my own. But then to be very vigilant at the same time that who is influencing that thinking to become an individual. So like even in integral philosophy, we talk about that integral yoga is all about collective. So yes, I really want to be in the world, to change the world, all of those things. But what kind of individuality I am taking to the collective, that is also very, very important. So if I am not really working on myself, then how am I really bringing a true sense of who I am to the collective for it to change? So having that journey happens only through these little experiments. For example, there are different, like they have this tendency, these days to have quotes of the day, thoughts of the day, positive thoughts, positive conversations. Now, if I read a thought that, oh, you should believe in yourself. Now, I may, as a youngster, say that, oh, yes, I want to believe in myself. But nobody has told me what self are they referring to. If they are referring to my surface, my outside self, which is always influenced by the outside world, who one day wants something, next day wants another thing, if I'm really believing, then it's only leading me to confusion. Then what self am I believing in? So without an understanding of what a self is, I'm like, no, I should believe. Or you should have your own identity, or you should protect your ideas. But what is the origin of that ideas? Where is it coming from? We don't question it. So if I don't have an understanding of what self is, then I am trying to protect something which in itself is very transitory in nature. So if I was a self at say 14 and I have changed, but there's something good which has happened at the age of 14, I will just stick to it and I will make that my identity, because no, that is the self I want to hold on to, because that is what gave me something. So how, especially the key on the path of yoga is that rejection becomes a very natural process, because you keep growing onto yourself deeper and deeper. So that tendency, that need to hold on to disappears. And that is why belief is the starting point. It can be as a motivation for you that, oh, I have to believe in myself. Yes, I want to believe in myself. But then I'm like, okay, what aspect of self then can I really look into it? And especially always we have that sense of wanting to know. And wanting to know can be either looked at from the outside, that, okay, for example, I want to know, okay, how was this watch created? Or I can have that wanting that, oh, how did the universe came into existence? Both are essentially coming from that sense of wanting to know. That is the crux. So if I want to go beyond that and translate into experience, then I will get into, okay, I want to take upon myself to do little experiments in my life, to walk that path of inquiry and see what happens. So if I want to have that sense of connection with the deeper self, or if I'm looking at, say, from the lens of integral, like, okay, how does my mind works, or how does my mind influences my emotions? So then I have to walk into that path and experiment it. I can't just read about it. Yes, reading about it can be the first step. It's like reading a cooking book and saying that, yes, my stomach is full. Reading will not help. Then I have to cook it. Then I will see that, okay, these are the ingredients written, but it might be that the proportion which is written, I may not be able to do it exactly. But then I'm like, oh, I'm a very bad cook. Or I can say that, okay, can I bring in a personalized touch to it? Because maybe I'm using a cookbook, but at least I have eaten food before. It's not a young person is born and he's like looking at. So you have a sense of taste, you know what food is. So if you really tune into your own self, that sense of intuitive knowledge will guide you through. And this is a very common practice, especially we have seen in Indian kitchens, no? You ask anybody that how is this cooked or what is the proportion. They'll be like, yeah, it's like, no, hardly there are people in the Indian kitchen who will tell you, no, this tablespoon, this kind of ingredients, this much quantity. They're like, yeah, you will know by you will do. So knowing by doing, which essentially leads to knowledge by identity. Why? Because you become one with the object. When you are, and the same happens with, if you're reading something, if you're really, really interested in, for example, say, what has Sri Aurobindo written about, or what was Mother talking about? So even if you just take one thing and make it your own, and that is when the knowledge is revealed to you, it is a universal knowledge. Because multiplicity in the world is only on the outside. Behind is that this one universal principle operating. And that is why it's just a mental concept when we look at, say, we always have this division between science and spirituality. Both are based on experiments. So if you look at like a scientist or say a sage, both have done experiments. Scientist took a material from the outside because he was very curious in the tangible world. Sage was very curious about the intangible world. Both have experience of both the worlds, but it's like, where does my interest lies? So scientists will take up something in the material world, open it, cut it, do whatever permutation, combination, and see what is made. So what is behind that experiment? An intention to know. And what can I contribute in the world? How can I make the world a better place to live? When I'm looking at a sage, is more interested in the intangible, that there's some sense of who I am, or there's some greater sense which is beyond this, I want to find out. So the sage goes inside deeper, 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 explores all the complexities. The scientist goes outside, kind of delve deeper into the complexities, and both create something. And the beauty is that both of these aspects are rooted in that one aspiration to know and connecting to something which is highest, which is beyond my capacity. The limitation comes when one rejects the other. And you will only reject the other, again, when it is not so rooted in your experience, but it is just an idea. You will always reject an idea. An experience is never rejected. It is only purified. So this is one thing which we understand. And the beauty of, say, eternal exploration is, or when I speak about the sage exploration, that is not temporal in nature, that is eternal. So if today I bring to you any scripture, for example, any scripture you will read today, we all know that it was written thousands of years ago, but it still feels so real to us. It still feels that, yes, this is what I want to do, or this is what I've surrendered my life to. And when you look at any scientific research, they keep upgrading themselves. Oh, this was in 90s, oh, this was in 60s, this is old, because more and more. Because they have the tendency of getting lost in the multiplicity, because they're attaching their identity to it. That, oh, this is what I have done. And you have to keep improving on it, because they get lost in the multiplicity. Whereas a sage is rooted in the unity. So, for example, I was giving you the cooking example. When I have hold on the ingredients, I can mix and match and make many dishes. But if I just have learned one dish from somebody without giving into any thought or experience, then even if those ingredients can make another dish, I will not have that confidence to make it, because I have not put in my own experience into it. So I'm like, no, I've just learned one, I will keep repeating it. So that will be give me a sense of restriction. It will not give me a sense of expansion. So making knowledge your own gives you a sense of expansion and a sense of wideness, where you can be very, very rooted that, oh, this is what I believe in, this is what my worldview is, but you will also leave space for other people's worldview. So there will be no clash, there will be integration. And that is precisely the fundamental basis of integral yoga, that more and more when you open yourself, you become very steadfast in your own path, that this is what I follow. And you also have space for other things, because what you see in your own sadhana, you also see the possibility in others. So even that limitation is not threatening to you. You are more and more able to offer yourself to the world. And the more and more you offer yourself to the world, the more and more there's a possibility of the world to become a better place. And this is essentially how we change our methods of behavior. We are not limiting ourselves to the conditioning which we have. We are opening more and more to our inner sense of self which naturally is expansion. So what we are trying to understand here is that how to really embark on that journey, that yes, I read something or I heard something or I saw something which really touched a chord within me which goes beyond my sensory understanding. And in that moment, what is that first thing that comes naturally to me? Is it that, oh, I want to explore it more? Or I like, no, this is challenging. So and it's very subtle. If you create your own understanding of how you operate in the world, so you either just go like this or you go like that. And in that moment, you realize that, are you intending to explore more and more? And when this experience gets more and more rooted in you, gets more and more in a sense which gives you that peace. So today if somebody comes to you and says that, okay, for example, if somebody comes to me and says that, no, what you're talking about integral yoga, this is not, and this is not, see, somebody's XYZ yoga is what is more important. So if I don't have an experience of it, my identity is threatened. But if I have a certain experience, so nobody can take away your experience. Somebody, like how I said in the beginning, can take away what you have borrowed from the world. Then I'll be like, oh my God, that person is saying that, no, what you're saying is wrong. Then I'm identityless, and all we strive in the world is to have an identity. But if there's an experience in me and somebody comes to me and questions that, no, integral is not what it is, then because I have an experience of integral, I will immediately become aware of what is the movement which is happening in me when somebody is questioning my belief. So then the questioning also becomes a part of your journey. So if that questioning made me question, then I realize, okay, this much work is still pending, I have to work on these complexities. Or if that tells me that I secretly think that no, that person is right, that will also tell me. So everything on the outside, whatever is happening, or for that matter, somebody comes to me and is like, no, integral is the thing. Then do I see a sense of expansion in a more subtle way, or an ego expansion? That, see, I am a follower of integral, they are also saying integral is the best. So every conversation, every experience on the outside just gives you more and more sense of how that knowledge is translating into your own experience. And all of these things when I spoke about is more at an individual level. Even if you look at it from a collective level, you will realize that it's only, like Sri Aurobindo has spoken about the cycle of society, and at one point he speaks about the rational society, the individual society. And that is precisely when this idea comes in that people start questioning the beliefs, people start questioning the conventions, that no, we have been following these for ages, what is the reason for it, tell me. And it's only the questioning that leads to the subjective experience. And it's only the subjective experience that helps us grow on the path of yoga. So all these things which we look around just kind of ties it up in our own being. When we have that spirit of inquiry, when the act of questioning gets refined more and more in our own understanding. So from what aspect of my being am I questioning? How is my understanding deepening? Because understanding only deepens with time. It's not that if I read something and then I share. That's precisely how our own education system is also changing. We are bringing in the experience, but the error which we make with that experience is that we give so much importance to sensorial experience that though it is experiential, or it's hands-down experience, it kinds of creates a gap between the inner experience and the outer bridging with the experience. So though we use the word experience, it is also very important to understand in what context are we using. Experience can also be used sitting here and listening to me, or just feeling, say, the temperature of the room. That is also one kind of sensorial experience. But simultaneously, there's also an experience going on with when these words are being processed in your mind. That, okay, what is this information which is being shared is doing to me? So there's an experience which is helping you in the outside world to function. There's an experience in the inner world which is helping you to grow. And how do you bring those two experiences together? That is what makes your own journey. And that is precisely when I speak about spirit of inquiry. It's the intention that matters. If I'm inquiring with an intention, with the clarity of purpose that I want to move forward, then that is really helping me. But if I'm inquiring or questioning with an intention, say just to prove a point, or just a very mechanical way of establishing something very superficial on the outside, that has a very different attention. So all these things really help us bridge the gap that yes, we can start and keep that aspiration that, oh, I have to transcend the dualities. But for transcending the dualities, you have to experience the dualities from a detached manner. And when you experience those dualities, and that too in a very detached manner, in a way that not, oh, I have nothing to do with the experience, but diving deep into the experience with being rooted in the self, so that the potentiality of the experience comes out. And you add it to that, okay, this is what is required for me. So all these things are basically to talk about how those little experiments with self unveils the complexities of our own being, helps us to really bridge the gap between what we know and what we experience, and gives a sense of continuity to our journey. So how one thing leads to another, and then walking on the path is more of an exploration in joy, because every day you find something new. So, okay, I believed in this because of my family conditioning or my education conditioning, but now I'm walking on the path of yoga, this is slowly breaking. So even to be there for yourself when this journey is unfolding, and create that safe space of exploration for that construction, for that destruction, for that reconstruction, because that is what the journey is. I reach a point, I realize this is it, then something comes up and I was like, no, this is not, then I drop, then I move forward. So all that is required is taken, what is not required gets dropped. And that journey, when we do with awareness, it leads to more and more in sense of contributes to the evolution of consciousness, which we keep talking about. And that was the whole idea, to just bring in that, I said the whole idea, but the idea is to not just restrict ourselves to the idea and move towards more and more experience, bring in some light into it, some sense of movement into it. And just in the spiritual context or in the sadhana context, we can see that even when we move from belief to faith, which is more of dynamic in nature, which has a sense of vitality, this is what is all required. In fact, I would just like to point out two things which the mother says in these commentaries. One, when she speaks about that the greatest of men is who has that sense of the uncreated. And that is the sense which helps him move forward in life. Like in the beginning when I said that, yes, there is something I want to know. Now, if I want to shift the responsibility of that knowing to another person, I get into those dogmas, those rituals, those structures, because I've given the responsibility to somebody else that I have a sense, but I'm not sure if I have the capability to know, you tell me. And you will tell me, okay, I'll believe. So I'll stop. But if I give in that spirit of inquiry to that sense of uncreated, that is when the expansion happens. And I would just like to end with few words where Mother ended this whole chapter, the Adept explanation. She said that just to find out the number of things we believe and assert, simply because it is customary to believe and assert them, is indeed a very interesting discovery. And that is essentially the discovery which you're talking about. That anything which is told to you, if even for a second you pause and question that what can be the story behind it, and is it applicable to my life or not? So even that questioning begins, it helps us. And also just one thing which I was reminded here, that it's not that belief is completely wrong. Like in the beginning I said that it is required as a starting point and also as a sense of functionality. That if I want to function in the world, if I want to say go eat somewhere or go see a doctor for some ailment, or I want to get admission in an education institute, I do base my judgment or my action on certain sense of pre-information I hold. So if I'm just looking for a surface level engagement with the world to just come, act and just go away, then I'm okay with believing and just living my life. But if I have that sense of uncreated and I want to explore that, then I have to make that journey from belief and experience. And that's what in this chapter Mother says in the end. Now go and look into your thoughts and consciousness. For all the things that you assert without proof, you will see. So I think that is the request which I have for all of us, including myself, that we just go and see, even if one or two beliefs that come to us, that all our life we have believed in them, but we don't have any proof of it. And how does it make us feel? So if I just want to leave you with that thought, and thank you. I will just now ask Dr. Bijlani if he can come and share his thoughts.
This chapter in Commentaries on the Dhammapada by the Mother is titled The Adept, the accomplished one, the perfect one who has arrived. And there is a description of all the qualities that such a person has. This person is always in a state of joy, not bound by anything, has none of the attachments and bondages to possessions and relationships the way most of us have, and it appears very tempting to have those qualities. But the important thing is, how did this perfect person get there? And in fact, the Dhammapada calls this person the rarest amongst the men, the highest and the best amongst the men, which means it's something which is not something very common. And this person got there through a certain process. And what was the process? That is what this chapter is essentially about, that the process starts with belief. Belief is something mental, something that we believe in without having the necessary knowledge, and sometimes not even insisting on our belief being rational. A related word is faith. Faith is more emotional rather than intellectual. Faith is emotional, whereas belief is intellectual. But essentially both are something that we assert, we are willing to accept, we are willing to let them guide our life without the necessary knowledge. This is something that many of us find rather unpleasant to accept, and we feel that, well, occasionally it may be so, but by and large I believe in only what I know. But then as we saw in this session, it is just the other way around. We believe in most of the things without the necessary knowledge, and it's a long process from that belief to knowledge, and from there getting to the state of the adept or the perfect one. And the chain goes something like this, that we start with faith and belief, which are good starting points, and it applies to something very concrete, as was mentioned in the talk, like say you believe in a cook, say like Tarla Dalal, and so you buy her book and think that if I make any dish based on the recipes she has given, it will turn out to be good. You never made it, but then you cook it, it may not come up to your expectations, but at the same time you now have experience, and you can use this experience to modify the recipe if you like, and you may arrive at something better. But you started with a belief, or you go to a doctor, you say I believe in Ayurveda, so you go to an Ayurvedic physician, and therefore you start with the expectation that what this doctor prescribes will make me well, and in fact to some extent it does work. That belief helps in getting better. It applies also to the spiritual field. The rishis and the mystics have described that lasting, imperishable, absolute reality, the uncreated, as the Mother calls it in this chapter, the one who did not have to be created because it was always there and is always there. We have a vague or some sort of a dim awareness of something uncreated being there, which is behind all creation. We don't have the knowledge or experience, but we start with a belief and we start with a faith. And from there, then we go to a little more knowledge, a little more experience, and then we try to put this knowledge into practice. When we put it into practice, like say when you cook the dish, that experience improves upon the knowledge. So this chain of belief to experience to knowledge, and from knowledge to further experience, and then this knowledge experience chain getting strengthened by repeated practice of what our present state of knowledge is. But this is sort of the process of deepening of the knowledge, which is required like the seasoning of timber, and without that the person will not make much progress. And therefore one of the necessary ingredients, as was again pointed out in the talk, is time. Sri Aurobindo calls it one of the 4 important aids on the path of yoga. Don't be impatient. The aspiration should be persistent and intense, but not impatient. It will take time. As you know, Kabir says in one of the couplets, if you give too much water to a plant, it will not grow faster. It is programmed to grow at a certain rate. And that is what happens here also, moving from belief to knowledge, from knowledge to, rather belief to experience, from experience to knowledge, and from knowledge to practice. And then this chain continuing repeatedly to improve all parts of this chain, so that ultimately one may have the knowledge, and then the faith and the belief may not be necessary, because now then this person has the total knowledge. Why this total knowledge is important is because till we have not reached that stage of having that total knowledge, we are not constantly aware of it. And if we are not constantly aware of it, we cannot bring it into our life all the time. And that is why we cannot experience all the joy that has been described in this person who has arrived there and who is perfect. So it is because of that we cannot experience that type of joy. We cannot experience what tempts us on the path. But at the same time, one can just proceed with the faith and confidence that with time it will come, and along the journey there is enough to keep us engaged, enough to encourage us, because every step on the path brings a little more of what we are looking for, a little more joy, a little more peace, a little less attachment, and that's how we find that life keeps getting more pleasant, more happier and healthier, and that keeps us going on the path. So long as we don't get satisfied with the gains on the path and continue, it's okay to enjoy the freedom and the joy that we experience as we go on the path, because a type of freedom, it liberates us from so many bondages and attachments and limitations. So long as we keep enjoying that progressive freedom and liberation and the joy that it brings, we will continue on the path, not stop midway that yes, I'm satisfied. So that is what is important. It's a long process, a lifelong process, but all the same, it's an enjoyable journey.